Hutt? Is Jabba the Hutt's son hot now? Hey guys, hello and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So today we have a pretty crazy situation, and it's one which I think a lot of us anticipated when we first learned that Rotta the Hutt, Jabba's son, would be returning in the Mandalorian and Grogu, all grown up. Well, with the movie now just a couple of months away, word is spreading, and wider audiences and more casual Star Wars fans are just finding out today that A, Jabba had a son in the first place, I guess not everyone saw the Clone Wars movie in 2008, and B, that he looks like this. He's got a six-pack and is going to be central to the next Star Wars film. And while it's true, information about the character being in the movie has been out for over a year now, and he was even in the trailers, Empire magazine just gave us a fresh new look. A proper close-up of Rotta as a warrior. Now it should be noted that muscular and ripped Hutts are nothing new. You might remember Boku and Gracchus from the comics, but this photo has sparked some pretty wild reactions on both sides. Excitement, puzzlement, straight up WTF responses, and I'll begin by giving you my take. Maybe it's because I'm very close to this stuff, I cover Star Wars news pretty much every day, but I'm just happy for more aliens in Star Wars. And to be honest, he looks exactly as I imagined. I know there are people saying this looks awful, but to me, it's fine. He's fine. I mean, Hutts were always a bit of a wild species to begin with. And on the bright side, I should say this, anatomically speaking, everything is correct. Which I will say is pretty surprising for Disney Star Wars, because they tend to make mistakes, they tend to flip-flop on the lore, but in this case, they're going back to OG Hutt biology. Why do I say this? Because they gave Rotta 3 fingers. This is accurate to Return of the Jedi Jabba, and also the twin cousins from Book of Boba Fett, who are also in the movie, whereas in The Phantom Menace, A New Hope Special Edition, and Star Wars Outlaws, they have 4 fingers. But before we celebrate, this creative choice, though minor, is a retcon of Rotta himself when he was a Huttlet in animation. He had 4 fingers in each hand, whereas this time, he only has 3. But look, to most fans this won't matter, but if you're a lore specialist, I can understand why you might be in two minds about this. Because on the one hand, it's awesome that Rotta is back. The CG looks pretty cool, he's going to be a warrior gladiator, but if you're pedantic about small details, then that might piss you off. But like I say, even back in the George Lucas days, Jabba himself had an inconsistent amount of fingers on each hand. But speaking of George, one of the main reasons I wanted to bring this up is I saw a few social media posts saying that George would hate this, that he would hate Disney milking Jabba and giving him a son. Now look, while I sympathise with and share a lot of criticisms levied towards Disney Star Wars, people are forgetting that it's the maker himself who introduced Rotta to Star Wars canon in the first place. He long predates the acquisition, and it was George Lucas with Dave Filoni who introduced Rotta into the Clone Wars movie in 2008, and their reasoning is wilder than you might think. Back then, Rotta served as a MacGuffin, a plot device designed to force interactions between the Jedi and Jabba. Kidnapped by Count Dooku, Rotta's rescue by Anakin and Ahsoka was intended to secure the Hutt's vital hyperspace routes for the Republic. And secondly, and more controversially, George wanted to show Star Wars fans Jabba's softer side, that despite being a gangster crime boss, he was also a family guy. But I think what's really jarring to a lot of people with this photo is just how buff he is. And the reason that's so important is because he's the opposite of his dad. And I saw one or two folks say, this changes what we know about Hutt's biology. This retcons Hutt's biology. But that just isn't true. Setting aside a history of other buff Hutts, just because Jabba let himself go, it doesn't mean that all Hutts do that. And keep in mind, Jabba was supposed to be a metaphor for gluttony, hedonism, the grimy underworld, and because of who he was and his influence, he didn't have to move very much. But it doesn't mean that Hutts can't be in shape, and Rotta is clearly going a very different way to his late dad. Now at this point, my friends, I should say if you don't want any spoilers, you might want to turn away now. But according to the rumours, by the end of the movie, Rotta is going to join the New Republic, which is honestly pretty surprising given the fact the Hutt twins, his own family, are villains in the movie, are against Din Djarin, and also considering he probably has a grudge after the way his father died. Leia Organa, Leia the Hutt Slayer, is a big part of the New Republic. And because we're in the Mandoverse, I saw an awesome theory that says, what if Rotta reunites with Ahsoka? What if he remembers the Jedi that saved his life? Anakin, of course, is a Force ghost at this point, but I think Rotta can, and I think will, if we know the way Dave Filoni sets things up, reunite with Ahsoka. But now let's get to the story, the article that everyone is talking about. There's a pretty insane write-up by thecuts.com. Is Jabba the Hutt's son hot now?
What?
And look, I have to be honest, I can't stand this kind of discourse, especially with a freaking Hutt. But you do have to wonder if on some level, the writer of this article knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the kind of response this would get. They knew whether you were someone who thought Rotta looks badass, or you think he looks like an abomination, that people would be talking about it. They say, quote, Rotta is all grown up and has the voice of Jeremy Allen White, so I imagine he's a brooding tough guy with a lot of emotional turmoil simmering beneath the surface. He is also absolutely shredded, they say. And luckily, we do have some new comments from Jon Favreau, who said this: the reason Rotta is so swole is because his job requires it. Rotta's in top form, fighting the pits, a gladiator of sorts. Favreau then goes on to say that this new muscular Rotta was inspired by Adonis Creed, Michael B. Jordan's character from the Creed movies. When you're trying to establish yourself and your name is famous, when you're Jabba the Hutt's kid, what does that do? The answer is to never skip chest day. And something I find fascinating in what Jon Favreau just said is he implies that everyone knows that Rotta is Jabba's son. But is that just on Al-Hutta or throughout the criminal underworld? Is Rotta treated like royalty? Is he a nepo baby, so to speak? And what's his relationship like with the twins, Jabba's cousins? Did he agree with their decision to go to Tatooine and try to dethrone Boba Fett? Or does he want nothing to do with those shady dealings? There is clearly a reason Din is sent after him, but I wonder how much of Jabba's legacy still matters. See, this is why I said the other day that going to Nal Hutta, maybe going to Nar Shaddaa, would have been the perfect way to feed into Book of Boba Fett Season 2. But that's Jabba's son, that's the way he looks, he's George Lucas's character, and I'm sure, at some point, Dave consulted George about this, gave him a phone call and said, look, we're bringing Stinky back, any advice? And finally, my friends, a new comment from the voice of Rotta, Jeremy Allen White, who says this: he'll mostly be talking in basic, but there is a little bit of Huttese, which by the way, Din Djarin understands. And he says in preparation for the role, he was told to revisit Jabba's scenes. That was more for the modulation of his own performance, but I imagine there are going to be a lot of fun Jabba the Hutt Easter eggs. What do you guys think? Share your thoughts on the new photo, the new information, how do you respond to this? And if you enjoyed this video, my friends, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.